Something I wanted to try for a while is to recreate the same drawing in as many different mediums as I can use. It's mostly just as a personal experiment, but I think it'd be fun to compare and contrast what different art supplies are capable of, and then I can compile all of those speed paints into one video to share my thoughts with all of you. This, however, is not that video. I realized pretty quickly that I have limited experience with some of the supplies, like how I only really use colored pencils to add finishing touches to my marker illustrations. So before I get to do that video, I thought I'd practice those mediums a little bit more, and today I'll be making a colored pencil illustration with this set sent to me by Arrtx. This is not a sponsored video, and I am not getting paid to say anything in this video, so all thoughts and opinions are mine and mine alone. But since they did send these to me free of charge, I just wanted to thank them before I got into it. With that out of the way, let's get to the unboxing. Taking the lid off the box, it's actually divided into two sections that aren't connected to each other. Something that drives me crazy is when companies don't organize their supplies in order of the numbers that they have on them. So I'm happy to say that they did this with their pencils. However, the first half was in the second section, and the second half was in the first section, which drove me crazy. It really didn't take long at all to switch them, but organization is important to me, alright? The pencils are also held up by these foam inserts, and I'll talk about it more later, but I think these make a much bigger difference than I thought. Filling out a swatch sheet is probably my favorite part of getting new art supplies, and this set did not come with one. After filming this video, I found out that they have blank swatch sheets on their website for their different supplies that you can download and then print out yourself, which is very helpful, and I wanted to be sure that I mentioned that because I had no idea, and knowing that would have saved me a lot of time at making my own swatch sheet by hand. When actually swatching them, I split each box into two. I'd color the whole box with just a quick layer where I press fairly lightly. Then I'd color half of the box by pressing a lot harder and trying to even out the texture of the colored pencils. Doing this helps me get a better idea of the full range of colors a single pencil can give me. And the official swatch sheet on their website divides each rectangle in half like I did, probably for the same reason, which is a really nice touch. I really love the color variety in this set. I love using bright and saturated colors, and these definitely deliver on that front. And even though there are a few colors that are really similar to each other, I can't really think of what other colors I would replace them with. The thing is with colored pencils is that you don't really need light and desaturated colors because you can achieve those pretty easily by pressing lightly and then blending that with either a white or a light gray. I didn't use them in this video, but I also really love the fluorescent pencils, and I'd really love to try making a drawing with only fluorescent art supplies that I have and then blind my viewers with how bright it is. If this bit of audio sounds different from all the rest of the video, no it doesn't. I totally remembered to include this when I was recording audio. I think one of my biggest complaints about these colored pencils is this metallic-y texture that they have to label all of the colored pencils with. As a detail, I think it's really nice, and I do like the little star sparkly thingamabobs that are all over all of the pencils. I think it looks very nice, but this texture in combination of the color that it is and the size that it is, it made it really hard sometimes to figure out what the hell the colored pencil said. So to make sure that I had the right colored pencils, I had to really squint and look hard at the colored pencil that I was holding to make sure that the number was right. My eyesight isn't too bad, but I am currently operating without a pair of glasses, so it was a bit tricky at times, and I wanted to mention that for people out there who have much worse eyesight than me and maybe have some sort of visual impairment. So keep that in mind if you're interested in buying them, because I struggled with it sometimes. But moving on to the actual drawing itself, my sketching process was the same as always, but if you've never seen it before, I start by messily plotting everything out, and then once I'm happy with the placement of everything, I lighten it with a kneaded eraser and then taking the time to sketch all the details. I debated sketching with the colored pencils too, but I decided against it because I just wasn't confident that I wouldn't need an eraser while I was sketching, and colored pencils don't typically erase very well. I also didn't have the proper paper for making a colored pencil illustration, which was definitely an obstacle. When using pencils, colored or otherwise, you want a paper that is more textured so the pencil has something to grip onto. Long story short, textured paper makes it easier to blend and layer for both graphite and colored pencils. The only textured paper I had was rather small, and I wanted it to work bigger for this specific drawing, and the only bigger paper I had was Bristol paper, which is very smooth and the exact opposite of what you want when using colored pencils. As a result, I had to press a lot harder than I'd normally have to in order to layer and blend, And I also wasn't able to rub out the texture as much as I would have liked. I did some quick tests in my sketchbook, which has a bit more tooth to the paper, and neither of these were much of an issue, so that was definitely because of the paper I was using. Even though I did have to press harder in order to blend and layer, they still performed pretty well despite the paper disadvantage. The colored pencil texture is more prominent than I would have liked, but with some added pressure, they did layer wonderfully. With the exception of opaque art supplies like acrylic paints, you can't really layer light colors on top of dark ones. And colored pencils are in this weird gray area of transparent and opaque, so they can be pretty hit or miss with layering lighter colors on top of the darker ones. And so in terms of that, these were pretty average as far as colored pencil goes, I would say. So I'd occasionally use white or a similar color to add some subtle highlights. Since I had to press harder than normal to compensate for the poor paper choice, I was dealing with so much more pencil dust than normal. I wish this is something that I tested on my sketchbook because I was dusting off my drawing what felt like every 5 minutes. I used a large watercolor brush I have to brush off my drawing instead of using my hand because it's much softer, so that way I could avoid making streaks of color with pencil dust when I moved my hand across the drawing. There were a couple of times that I used my hand out of habit, but I think I was able to cover up the streaks pretty well. And another side effect of needing to press as hard as I did was the constant pencil sharpening that I had to do. But by doing that, I came across an unexpected perk of these pencils. I don't think there was a single time I struggled to sharpen a pencil. I don't really know if I'm going to explain this well enough, but I'm doing my best here. Have you ever tried to get a nice point on your pencil, but the pencil keeps breaking, so you end up using your sharpener for an eternity? Like, it doesn't matter how much you try to sharpen your pencil, right before it gets to the perfect pointy tip that you are looking for, it just breaks off and then you're really sad. That didn't happen at all with these, and I think it has to do with the packaging. The average set of colored pencils are packaged by laying on their side, resting in a plastic organizer, sitting in a hard tin or plastic container. This means there's a lot of opportunity for the lead inside the pencil to break since they shuffle around the containers, banging against various hard surfaces. Anything from them being shipped to the store that they are being sold in, being shipped and delivered to your house, and then even you just moving them around as you're trying to reorganize your desk or something. And since they are always shuffling around, hitting those hard surfaces, it's a lot more likely for the lead inside to break, which causes the struggles of sharpening the pencils. The box for these pencils is a pretty sturdy cardboard, but the pencils themselves are stored upright in a soft foam organizer where the pencils themselves don't really touch each other or the box at all. There's a lot less chances for the lead to break like this, since they're both sitting upright and are not really touching anything. So I didn't come across any issues while I was sharpening them. I never really thought about how the packaging itself could impact art supplies like this, but it's probably something I'm going to be paying more attention to from now on. When the bulk of the drawing was finished, I wanted to try using some liners and my white gel pen on top, because these are things that don't always sit on top of colored pencils well because of the waxy finish, especially liners and other similar inks. But they are something that I use in my traditional art a lot regardless of the supplies, so I did want to try them out for this video. The white gel pen worked just fine so long as you pressed light enough so the pencil didn't rub onto the nib, and the liners performed basically exactly how I thought they would. They sucked. I tried 3 different ways of lining. I used a brush pen, a fine liner, and a ballpoint pen, and they each faced their own problems. Again, I kind of expected them because that's how it typically goes with colored pencils. The brush pen was able to get nice and dark, but smeared extremely easily, because typically when you use a brush pen, or any kind of ink really, it absorbs into the paper underneath, and sometimes you have to let it sit for a while, but otherwise it's pretty good. But when there's a layer or several layers of colored pencils on it, it can't really absorb into the paper, and the colored pencils are not made to absorb ink. So instead of sinking in and becoming a nice permanent dark area on the drawing, it would basically just sit on top of the colored pencils. And because of that, it smeared extremely easily, and there's more than a couple of times where I smeared them on my drawing and then got frustrated, but you know what, I brought this on myself. And the nibs of the fine liners and the ballpoint pen did not like the waxy finish whatsoever, and that's just another big issue of trying to use fine liners or pens on top of colored pencils, because whenever you try to do it, it's also an issue of how the nibs can scratch up the waxy finish of the colored pencil, and they can get onto the nibs, and it just makes it a whole mess. pencils. I fully expected all of this since that's how it typically goes with colored pencils, so I wouldn't hold it against these ones. It was just something that I was curious about and wanted to try. When the drawing itself was finished, I realized I had made quite a mess on the paper, so I cut it out and pasted it on some scrapbook paper that I decorated. This is something that I want to do more with my traditional art. I want to get back into traditional art in general, but I love doing this sort of scrapbooky stuff in my sketchbook, and so I really want to try adding this sort of elements to my finished traditional illustrations. There's a scrapbook paper I had that had a bunch of sky patterns on it, so I cut one out, trimmed it to make it more of a typical paper size, and then I decorated it with some other colored papers that I had, also some wrapping paper from a past Christmas. And after I made it nice and pretty, I just pasted the actual drawing on top of that. And voila, our drawing is complete. Overall, I really liked these pencils. I wouldn't say they're the best colored pencils I've used, but I think they performed extraordinarily well for their price. This set has 126 pencils for about $50 US. The best performing colored pencils I've used are Prismacolor, and the closest set they have in terms of numbers is a set of 132, and that sells for an average price of a whopping $130 US. As much as I like Prismacolor's pencils, I'd recommend the Arrtx pencils over them because of those prices alone. Prismacolors are great, but I will be the first to say there is no reason to spend over twice the price of what these colored pencils offer when these work just fine, even without the proper paper for colored pencils. If you've used these before, let me know what you think of them, because I'm admittedly not the most knowledgeable when it comes to the finer specs of colored pencils. I would definitely love to hear the thoughts of those of you who colored pencils are their bread and butter. But I want to give another thank you to Arrtx for being a good friend of the channel and for sending me their pencils to try out. I'd like to give a quick thank you to all of my patrons for helping make this video possible, especially my tiers 3 and 4 members. Big shout out to Jules, Sammy Bear 127, Sugar Cookie 2, Nyoko Arts, Sage Rosado, It's Storky Arts, Castle Roodle, Anna, Hikariu, Jamie, JDOs, Creatively Anxious, Dazzy Bones, Lauka 2, Lovely Siren, Jay Johnson, Vivi Brown, Bread, Fantastic Artist, Joss, Blue Devil 4, Rin Rinny, Corvid Dom, Tina K, Oswin, Sammy the Boy Draws, Flap, Kaden, Anime Fan 110, Yuinaman, Art Iconics, Damaged Coda, Deanna Riano, Boo, Snapdragon Fern, Nest Bones, Austin, Dustnook Arts, Nishi Studios, Fog Scorpio, Max D. Wellington, Squid Arts, Saki Saki, Zoe235, Helicopter, Gonzelli, Mediocre at Worst, Ari Wolf, Caleb Sanchez, Dinksalot, T, Kathan, Kitty Creations, Natalia Dufty, and Small Bean Soda. Thank you all so much for the extra support. It means a lot to me. And if you're interested in becoming a part of my Patreon, you can find the link in the description box below. We did it, another video done. Thank you all for watching. I really appreciate it. This actually wasn't the next video I intended on planning, but for one reason or another, ADHD. The other video I was planning on making wasn't finished in time, and I wanted to get this out within a reasonable time frame, so the kind people at Arrtx don't hate me. But the next video I'm making should be a complete tour of my workspaces and all of the art supplies that I use, excluding these ones because I got these after I filmed that one. So stay tuned for that. And yeah, thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye.